since you signed on to make this movie.
2 years this month since I last sat in this lovely chair and talked to you.
And at that time,
Rachel Zegler was once seen as Disney's next big star, the chosen face of their ambitious live-action remake of Snow White. Backed by a billion-dollar studio and the weight of a timeless legacy, the film was promoted as the crown jewel of Disney's effort to modernize its classic fairy tales. It was meant to celebrate the 1937 masterpiece, while introducing it to a new, more diverse generation. Disney invested heavily in the project, confident that nostalgia, star power, and the brand's magic would guarantee success. But what should have been a dream opportunity for Rachel quickly unraveled into one of Disney's most talked-about failures in recent years. Instead of critical acclaim and box office glory, the film became a symbol of corporate overreach, divisive messaging, and star controversy. It struggled in theaters, became the subject of endless online mockery, and ultimately faded into obscurity on Disney+. The outcome was a far cry from the billion-dollar expectations once placed upon it. At the center of the fallout was Rachel Zegler herself, whose once promising rise in Hollywood turned almost overnight into a cautionary tale. The trouble didn't start when the film premiered. It began much earlier. Her outspoken comments during interviews and press events drew widespread criticism, and rather than building anticipation, they ended up alienating the very audience the film was meant to win over. Rachel Zegler's troubles deepened when she openly criticized the original Snow White, calling it outdated and problematic. Her remarks infuriated lifelong Disney fans who cherished the 1937 classic as a cornerstone of animation history. What she may have intended as modern critique was widely perceived as disrespect toward a beloved piece of cinema. Disney had hoped to carefully balance modern updates with timeless charm, but with its lead actress publicly dismissing the foundation of the story, that balance collapsed before the film ever reached theaters. What could have been excitement turned into backlash, as audiences began to feel the spirit of the fairy tale was being rewritten rather than reimagined. Behind the scenes, things weren't much better. Rumors of tension between Rachel and Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen, quickly spread. Instead of headlines celebrating their performances or on-screen chemistry, reports surfaced of creative disagreements and clashing personalities. Insiders claim the set atmosphere often felt strained, with artistic vision getting lost amid behind-the-scenes conflict. To make matters worse, Disney's marketing approach only fueled criticism. By heavily promoting the movie as a cultural milestone focused on diversity, inclusion, and representation, many felt the studio had sidelined what mattered most: the story itself. Fans weren't hearing about breathtaking visuals or powerful performances. They were hearing about awkward interviews, ego clashes, and divisive rhetoric. What should have been a magical return to a beloved tale became instead a cautionary example of how even the best intentions can backfire under the spotlight. By the time Snow White finally reached theaters, the damage to its reputation was already irreversible. Audiences had grown skeptical, and many chose not to show up at all. The box office numbers were grim. Half-empty theaters on opening weekend told the story clearly. Instead of sparking excitement, the film's release reignited online ridicule. Clips of Rachel Zegler's earlier interviews resurfaced, going viral for all the wrong reasons. Memes mocked her remarks, and the negative buzz spread faster than Disney could control. What was meant to be an easy win for the studio turned into an undeniable flop. When the movie was quietly released on Disney+, the poor viewership confirmed what the box office had already made clear. The audience had moved on. A project that was supposed to redefine the Disney princess legacy ended up as a cautionary tale about how poor messaging and misaligned talent can derail even the most lavish production. For Rachel, the professional fallout was severe. Rather than stepping back to let the backlash cool, she doubled down, framing herself as a victim of systemic bias. She argued that the criticism wasn't truly about her performance or her words, but about Hollywood's unequal treatment of outspoken women. According to Rachel, male actors could freely share their political views without consequence, while women like her were punished for doing the same. Her stance split public opinion. Some praised her courage and conviction, calling her defiance admirable in an industry that often punishes authenticity. Others saw it differently, as a refusal to accept responsibility, an attempt to shift the narrative from "I mishandled my biggest opportunity" to "I'm being silenced for speaking out." In one widely discussed interview, Rachel claimed that Hollywood had become unrecognizable, accusing the industry of caving to political pressure, retreating from diversity, and punishing those who dared to speak their minds. But to many observers, her comments felt more like excuses than revelations. The truth, they argued, is that Hollywood has always been political. For decades, stars from Robert De Niro to Alec Baldwin to Julia Roberts have spoken out on controversial issues, sometimes stirring backlash, but often maintaining their careers through careful balance and awareness of their public image. The difference, critics noted, was that those actors understood how to play the game, when to push, when to pull back, and how to protect their brand. Rachel, by contrast, seemed to turn her biggest opportunity into a battle against the very system that had made her famous. Instead of winning sympathy, she alienated much of her audience, and in doing so, jeopardized the career that once seemed unstoppable. Instead of showing grace under pressure, Rachel Zegler often fueled the backlash even further. At her peak, she was one of Hollywood's fastest rising stars, walking red carpets beside A-listers, fielding offers from major studios, and carrying the weight of a billion-dollar Disney franchise. But within months, that image began to crumble. The actress once hailed as Disney's future face became one of its most divisive figures. What was meant to be her defining role instead turned into a career setback. A reminder that in modern Hollywood, not every fairy tale ends happily ever after. Today, Rachel finds herself working on small independent films with limited budgets and even smaller audiences. These projects fly so far under the radar that most people wouldn't know they exist without deliberately searching for them. It's a sharp fall from the billion-dollar marketing machine that once plastered her image across billboards worldwide. One of her current films, rumored to co-star Marissa Tomei, reportedly carries a budget of under $10 million, a staggering drop compared to the scale and global reach she once enjoyed at Disney. Yet, more than the financial downgrade, what's truly missing is the relevance. The spotlight that once shone so brightly on her has dimmed, and the buzz that once surrounded her name has faded. Rachel seems acutely aware of this shift. In a candid interview, she confessed to feeling as though she's already aged out of Hollywood's favored bracket. A startling statement from someone still in her early 20s. But her comment wasn't really about age. Beneath it was a deeper realization that perhaps she had burned too many bridges too soon, assuming her momentum would last forever. Those doors of opportunity didn't slam shut. They closed quietly, one by one, while she was too busy fighting ideological battles in interviews instead of reconnecting with audiences. To her credit, Rachel isn't wrong about Hollywood's harshness, especially toward women. The industry has long been unforgiving, quick to idolize and just as quick to discard. But in Rachel's case, her downfall seems to be a mix of timing, ego, and miscalculation. A cautionary tale of how swiftly fame can fade when controversy overshadows the craft. Hollywood has always been ruthless, obsessed with youth, image, and behavior, and unrelenting in its scrutiny of actresses both on and off screen. But Rachel Zegler's decline can't be blamed solely on that system. Unlike many of her peers who quietly play by Hollywood's unspoken rules, Rachel openly challenged them. She called the system out, resisted it, and then seemed stunned when it pushed back. The truth is, studios don't want controversy magnets. They want reliable stars who can sell tickets, charm audiences, and bring families into theaters. And through her own words, Rachel gave them reasons to hesitate. One of the most infamous moments came during a press tour when she declared, "If you support Donald Trump, I don't want your business." In a country where millions still support the former president, that one statement went viral and instantly alienated a massive segment of potential viewers. Families who might have bought tickets for Snow White instead chose to boycott it. Even if her words were taken slightly out of context, the damage was already done. The remark didn't sound like an opinion. It felt like a rejection. And when your career depends on audience goodwill, telling a large portion of that audience that their support isn't wanted is a fatal mistake. Making matters worse was the perception gap. Other celebrities, like Pedro Pascal, have made political statements just as bold, if not bolder, and faced little to no backlash. But Rachel was judged differently. She was seen as self-righteous, dismissive, and ungrateful for the opportunities she'd been given. When Snow White flopped, those traits became magnified. Instead of sympathy, she attracted criticism, becoming a symbol, fair or not, of modern Hollywood arrogance. a young star who got everything too quickly and lost it by alienating the very fans she was meant to win over. Now, with the storm quieted, Rachel Zegler exists in a strange kind of limbo. She hasn't been officially canceled, but she's no longer in demand either. And in Hollywood, that quiet is often deadlier than public outrage. Once the studio calls stop, momentum fades fast. And another actress, one who knows how to smile for the cameras and say all the right things, steps in to claim the spotlight she left behind. The truth is, Hollywood doesn't wait for anyone. By the time a fallen star steadies themselves, the industry has usually moved on to the next big thing. Rachel Zegler may still believe that staying true to her convictions was the right choice. But in Hollywood, doing the right thing doesn't always mean doing the smart thing. The business runs on image, illusion, and broad appeal. Perception matters as much as talent, and in many cases, it matters more. Rachel's journey has now become a textbook cautionary tale in industry circles. A reminder of how quickly a career can crumble when a performer forgets that every word, every gesture, and every opinion is under constant public scrutiny. Rachel had every advantage imaginable: the lead role in a Disney classic, a growing fan base, and the full backing of one of the world's most powerful studios. Yet she chose to communicate in a way that made her sound more against the audience than for them. What fans wanted was simple: an enchanting escape, a story they could share with their children, and a chance to relive the magic of a beloved fairy tale. Instead, they got interviews that felt more like lectures, comments that sounded defensive or combative, and a star who appeared more focused on ideological battles than on capturing hearts. In Hollywood, there's an unwritten rule: let your work speak first. Only after winning the audience's trust does a performer earn the freedom to challenge norms or take bold stances. Rachel tried to skip that step. She entered the spotlight not just ready to perform, but ready to fight. And in doing so, she learned one of the industry's harshest lessons. Sometimes the greatest risk isn't being silenced. It's speaking too soon, too loudly, and to the wrong crowd. Meanwhile, Disney itself continues to wrestle with the aftermath. The failure of Snow White wasn't just a box office misfire. It became a symbol of a deeper identity crisis within the company. Longtime fans accused Disney of prioritizing agendas over storytelling, pushing moral lectures over magic, and losing the creative balance that once made its films universally loved. With declining Disney Plus numbers and dwindling excitement for live-action remakes, the studio's struggles became inseparable from Rachel's. What was meant to be a fresh chapter in the Disney princess legacy instead turned into a painful reminder of how fragile both stardom and brand loyalty can be. Instead of being remembered as Disney's next great princess, Rachel Zegler became the face of one of its most notorious flops. Rachel Zegler seemed to forget one of Hollywood's oldest truths: winning hearts always comes before winning arguments. Once the public stops rooting for you, once that sense of goodwill fades, it's nearly impossible to earn it back. Her downfall wasn't purely political. It was a matter of timing, tone, and perception. To many, she came to represent a cultural shift more interested in making statements than in telling stories. Fair or not, that perception stuck, and it became part of her identity in the public eye. Yet despite everything, Rachel hasn't vanished. She's still working, still present online, and still outspoken in her beliefs. But the energy feels different now. What once read as fiery conviction now carries an edge of frustration, a determination to be heard even as the world's attention has drifted elsewhere. Snow White ultimately became more than just a failed remake. It became a cautionary tale. For Disney, it symbolized what happens when corporate vision drifts too far from audience sentiment. For Rachel, it meant becoming the face of that failure, shouldering the blame for a project that was never entirely hers to bear. And that's the tragedy of her story. Rachel Zegler is undeniably talented. No one questions her ability to sing, act, or command a screen. But in Hollywood, talent alone is never enough. Success depends equally on grace, timing, and the ability to form a genuine bond with audiences. Those were the elements that quietly slipped through her grasp. The roles she's being offered today reflect an industry that no longer fully trusts her. She still works, but on a smaller scale. Independent films, limited releases, projects that attract niche attention rather than global buzz. It's a humbling chapter for someone once heralded as the future of Disney's magic. And in a moment of quiet reflection, she once joked that she was listening to her own inner thoughts, then admitted, they were not sophisticated. Maybe that's the most honest line she's ever spoken. Rachel Zegler has spoken candidly about feeling Hollywood's cold shoulder, describing in interviews the darker side of the industry, how studios, in her view, are turning away from diversity and reversing the progress that once felt unstoppable. There's genuine pain in her words, the kind that comes from realizing the spotlight she worked so hard to reach can burn just as easily as it can illuminate. She believed she was ascending toward the center of Hollywood's magic, only to discover how quickly that light can turn harsh. Yet the irony is that time is still on her side. Rachel is young enough, talented enough, and visible enough to reshape her story. To some, this period may be seen as a stumble, an inevitable rough patch in an otherwise promising career. To others, it looks like the result of a preventable misstep, a rise that came too quickly, with too much confidence and too little caution. Either way, the next few years will define what Rachel Zegler ultimately becomes. A lasting Hollywood name remembered for her talent and resilience, or a cautionary headline tied to one of Disney's most infamous misfires. And if Hollywood loves anything, it's a comeback. But true comebacks require more than conviction and social awareness. They demand humility, patience, and the ability to let the work speak louder than the persona behind it. If Rachel wants to reclaim her place, she'll have to remind audiences of why she was chosen for Snow White in the first place. The voice, the charm, and the spark that once hinted at magic. That means stepping back from the noise, choosing her projects wisely, and rebuilding trust one role at a time. Only then can she shift the narrative from controversy to redemption, and prove that her story isn't over, just paused. Because the truth is, in Hollywood, the camera is always in the room. Even when it's not pointed at Rachel Zegler right now, it's still there, watching, waiting. And if she listens closely, she might come to understand a lesson that countless stars before her have learned the hard way. Sometimes silence carries more power than 1,000 words. Hollywood has a short memory for failure, but a very long one for reputation. Talent has never been Rachel's problem. It never was.